parang di ko pa mapaniwala. Maraming salamat sa suporta. Sana patuloy yung suporta niyo sa
I said it many times. Nobody in this world, Russian athletes or Belarusian athletes, support the war. Nobody. How can we support the war? Nobody.
What is going through your minds right now?
I'm so blank. I'm thinking.
The silence in that press conference room was deafening. A palpable void where you could have heard a tennis ball drop. A stark contrast to the explosive forces gathering just beneath the surface of the women's professional tour. For days, perhaps, even weeks, the entire tennis universe had been walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around the colossal elephant in the room. Its presence felt in every locker room, every player lounge, and every hushed conversation in the media center. The whispers in the corners never quite coalesced into the public discourse everyone was craving. A collective holding of breath around the tension that had been building like a pressure cooker about to explode, threatening to shatter the carefully maintained facade of the sport. It was a toxic cocktail, brewed from the relentless churn of social media warfare, the intricate and often brutal dance of locker room politics, a series of questionable and momentum-swinging officiating decisions, and the kind of uncomfortable, profound silence that screams of a power structure, hoping that if it just ignores a problem long enough, it might magically dissipate into the ether. But then, Arina Sabalenka, the reigning world #1, a titan of the sport whose ferocious ground strokes often seem to hit harder than most of us hit our alarms on a Monday morning, finally stepped up to the microphone, and in that moment, the strategy of willful ignorance was rendered obsolete. What she did next changed everything, not with a lengthy, prepared monologue, but with a conciseness that amplified its power. She didn't dance around the question, offering one of those carefully crafted, legally vetted, personality-free responses that athletes are so often trained to deliver. She didn't smile politely and deflect, redirecting the inquiry to her match performance or her next opponent. No, Arina Sabalenka looked directly into the heart of the chaos that had been brewing and chose a side, not with a grand speech, but with 4 simple words, 4 syllables that landed with the devastating force of one of her signature first serves. She's not wrong. That was it. That was all it took. In that single, electrifying moment, the narrative didn't just shift. It exploded into 1,000 glittering, dangerous pieces. The establishment's carefully constructed wall of denial, built brick by brick with no comments and "we support our officials," cracked wide open, and suddenly everyone, from fans to journalists to fellow players, had permission to say what they'd been thinking all along. To truly understand the earthquake that Sabalenka had just triggered, we need to rewind the clock to move past the lightning-fast tennis news cycle where yesterday's scandal is already forgotten by tomorrow's headline. Some wounds don't heal just because we stop talking about them. They just fester beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to burst open, and the controversy surrounding the prodigious Filipina talent Alex Ayala hadn't healed. Not even close. It had been sitting there, covered with the thinnest of bandages, while everyone involved pretended it was fine as the infection of injustice spread underneath. For the better part of the last year, Ayala has been navigating the absolutely treacherous waters of the top tier of women's tennis. And for anyone paying close attention, a disturbing pattern had emerged. She kept finding herself on the wrong side of what officials euphemistically call interpretation when it comes to pivotal line calls, momentum killing lets over rules, and all those minute moments where an umpire's decision can completely alter the course of a match. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a tale as old as tennis itself. The rookie gets squeezed, the newcomer gets the tough calls, the established players, the household names, get the benefit of the doubt, while the young upstart has to prove herself twice as hard, battling not just her opponent, but the silent, implicit bias of the chair. It's not written in any rule book, but it's a reality every player who has fought their way up from the qualifiers knows intimately. But here's where Ayala's story diverges from the typical script. She stopped accepting it quietly. After her absolutely historic, jaw-dropping run to the Miami Open semifinals last year, a run that included taking down the then world #2 in a match that sent shockwaves through the sport, Ayala decided she had earned the right to speak her mind. Her recent comments about the double standards in officiating, about how certain players seem to get every close call while others have to win despite the officials, were seen by many insiders as a dangerous, career-limiting move. The unwritten rule in professional tennis is stark. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. You don't criticize the system while you're still fighting to establish yourself within it. You wait until you're untouchable, a multiple Grand Slam champion, with enough prize money to afford burning a few bridges. You certainly don't speak out when you're still outside the top 50, still sometimes dependent on wildcards, still proving you belong. The backlash was swift and predictable, entitled, arrogant, too much too soon. Critics crawled out of every corner of tennis media, and anonymous sources we all know, that means other players too cowardly to attach their names, whispered that Yala was difficult, developing a diva reputation. The establishment circled its wagons. The message was clear: apologize, walk it back, or watch your opportunities dry up. And it was into this firestorm that Sabalenka walked, her forwards acting not as an extinguisher, but as gasoline. What had been one young player's frustration against a system designed to keep her in her place was now transformed into a full-blown revolution, a display of player solidarity at its most powerful and rare. When the queen of the court publicly backs the rising princess of the Philippines, when the woman at the very top risks her own relationships with tournament directors and officials to defend someone still fighting for a firm foothold, you know something fundamental has shifted. The fans noticed immediately, and social media went absolutely nuclear, a digital wildfire that officials couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about a disputed line call anymore, it was about respect, fairness, and who gets to have a voice. This new era, however, is not a monolith. It's a complex ecosystem of triumph, rivalry, and cautionary tales. While Sabalenka was positioning herself as the tour's matriarch, a wise elder using her platform to protect the next generation and shape her legacy beyond trophies. And while Ayala was emerging as a cultural force, a symbol that you can come. From a country with no tennis infrastructure and still shake the world, another prodigy was facing a crisis of a different sort. Mira Andreeva, the phenom who at just 18 had already won 2 WTA 1000 titles, reached the French Open semi-finals and ascended to world number 5, was suddenly looking vulnerable. Her Australian Open campaign ended in the round of 16, a result that for any normal teenager would be a triumph. But for her, it was a regression, evidence that something had gone wrong. The loss itself wasn't the problem, it was the how. She seemed unable to find solutions, shrinking under pressure rather than rising to meet it. And one of the sharpest tactical minds in tennis history, Brad Gilbert, delivered a diagnosis that was as catchy as it was devastating. The fear hand, Gilbert wrote on social media, is a major issue in a lot of her losses lately. That term, fear hand, immediately went viral because it was so brutally accurate. Gilbert elaborated with surgical precision. It's becoming spinny, passive, and error-prone when the heat is on. I think a lot of the players now know that. This is the nightmare scenario for any professional athlete. The moment your weakness becomes common knowledge, the word was out. The scouting report was written and distributed throughout the locker room. Attack Andreeva's forehand in pressure. Moments, and it will break down. Against Elina Svitolina, one of the smartest tacticians on tour, Andreeva looked lost, winning only 59% of her first serve points, playing not to lose rather than playing to win. The fear hand isn't just a technical problem of grips and swing paths. It's psychological. It's the hesitation that creeps in when you realize the world expects perfection. The doubt that whispers in your ear just before you pull the trigger. The fear that you might disappoint, that you might prove the hype was just that. Gilbert's warning was stark. This had to be fixed in the short term, or making deep runs would become incredibly difficult. Tennis history is littered with prodigies who couldn't make that leap, who couldn't solve the puzzle once the locker room figured them out. Andreeva's struggle serves as the ultimate reality check in this narrative of empowerment and revolution, a reminder that talent is fragile and the pressure at the top is immense. And as if these interwoven dramas of leadership and vulnerability weren't enough, a new fiery rivalry was boiling over, adding another explosive layer to the tour's transformation. Wang Xinyu, representing the established Asian tennis power of China, a nation that has invested billions in a systematic approach to developing sporting talent, was not about to quietly cede the spotlight to the Philippines. Following a contentious match, the fan war erupted. Wang's statement that her fans were better was a match thrown on the dry tinder of national pride, creating the kind of conflict and tension that sports thrive on. Wong volunteered to be the antagonist in Ayala's fairy tale, and in doing so, created a rivalry that could define Asian tennis for the next decade. Tennis needs villains. It needs reasons for fans to become emotionally invested and the Ayala-Wong dynamic, a clash of the upstart nation against the established powerhouse, provides that in spades. What we are watching unfold in 2026 is a WTA tour that looks fundamentally different from anything we've seen before. The script is being rewritten in real time by athletes who are no longer content to just shut up and play. Social media has broken down the barriers between players and fans, giving everyone a platform to demand accountability and justice. Sabalenka's statement, "She's not wrong," is about integrity. Wong's statement, "My fans are better," is about competition and pride. Gilbert's diagnosis of the fear hand is about the brutal honesty required to survive at the top. Each statement alone is interesting. Together, they paint a picture of a sport in flux, wrestling with its own identity. The real question is what happens next. Does Sabalenka's intervention lead to meaningful change in officiating, or does it fade into just another headline? Does the Ayala-Wong rivalry elevate both players to new heights, or does it fizzle out in petty social media drama? And can Mira Andreeva fix her fear hand and fulfill the immense promise she holds, or will she become another cautionary tale of potential unfulfilled? The old hierarchies are being challenged, and the athletes themselves are seizing control of the narrative, united in their diversity and their shared understanding that, when it comes to the fundamental injustices and pressures of their profession, nobody in this world, no matter their flag, supports the dysfunction. Nobody. How? Can they? The game is changing, and the only certainty is that the ride is going to be a wild one.